NAACP, and we are um, uh, excited to be here tonight, talking about really higher education and the tenure track process, as some would call it, and the lack of representation when it comes to Black um, professors and other professors of color, especially when you look at predominantly white institutions. And so we want to have a conversation around that. Hopefully, we'll have a lively dialogue with those of you who are watching to have questions about this issue of tenure when it comes to Black academics actually being able to be successful in securing tenure at predominantly white institutions of higher learning. But today also, so we want to talk about that from a global perspective and talk about some of the things that some of the barriers and how we can remove these barriers as people who are interested in fighting for equity and inclusion, but also understanding the need to have professors of color in these institutions, so these young folks who look like them can see these academics and aspire to potentially one day maybe join the ranks of the academia and or just go out into the world in general and pursue other careers that they may be underrepresented in at this point. Also tonight, we're going to have Dr. Walter Burt, who is a former dean at Western Michigan University, to join us to kind of just weigh in on a conversation and have a serious and lively discussion around this issue. And let me say this, the reason why we decided to do this pop-up live stream tonight was fundamentally about the case of Calvin University versus Westbrook. And so that's Calvin University versus Dr. Nalova Westbrook. Dr. Westbrook was formerly employed by Calvin University in their Department of Education and brought what we consider just a wealth of not only intellectual capacity to the university, but a wealth of culture as well with her. And she is well established. If I think she can stand up to the best based on her academic dossier. And this case, in our opinion, has been quite disturbing on so many levels in the way that Calvin University is playing this case out for over a year. And I think, again, spending a lot of resources that suggest that there's a level of fiscal irresponsibility, because the monies that they're spending in legal fees and PR firms or what have you, are directly coming from the coffers of their students, their parents, and now taxpayer dollars, with this case being in the court system. And so we want to talk a little bit about that. And I tell you, I'm here at my desk, and there are just just a variety of information that I have in front of me with respect to this whole issue of tenure with regards to again, specifically Black faculty, in the fight for them to receive tenure. And so it is a conversation that we need to, and an issue, I would say, that this community here locally, we must watch. And it's not just about Calvin University, right? It's about other predominantly white institutions in this area, and probably the lack of representation when it comes to folks who are on the tenure track and ultimately actually receive tenure. And so wanted to really make the community aware of what is currently at stake in this case, locally here. I think many of us have heard about the Nicole Hannah Jones case that received national attention, went viral. Of course, Nicole Hannah Jones was a professor at UNC, University of North Carolina, and was originally, in, I believe, granted tenure, and then it was rescinded. And so that's where the case got not only wide media attention, but wide protest as well. And again, Black female, her academic credentials are impeccable, and again, working at a predominantly white institution, the sister is denied tenure. And so in the same case of Dr. Nalova Westbrook, when it comes to Kelvin University, of course, I think there are differences, but a lot of similarities when it comes to these cases. And as well, and many of you probably have heard that about Dr. Cornel West, who's world renowned, who I consider one of the most forthright opinion leaders, thought leaders in the country and in the world. He too, which is very interesting to me, was denied tenure by Harvard University, where he was an academic and a professor there as well. And so what's interesting when we look at Black tenured professors, I was looking at some data or some information from the Journal of Blacks in Education. And they specifically indicated or cited that Black tenure professors are rare. Thank you, Dr. Burt, for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
So we're just getting into the discussion, and I'm glad that you took time out of your schedule on a really short notice to participate in this conversation tonight. If you would, can you introduce yourself to our listening audience?
Well, again, my name is Walter Burt. I recently retired from Western Michigan University, where I was an associate professor. I did obtain tenure there at the university, and also I was the dean of the College of Education for 1 year. I got my undergraduate degree in biology from Alcorn State, my master's from Eastern Michigan University, and my PhD from the University of Michigan. I served in a number of administrative capacities, superintendent of schools, and then after I left the superintendency, I then went to Western Michigan University. So that's just sort of a brief background, and I've published quite a bit in professional journals throughout the United States.
Wow, so you have a long history and a stellar history in academia. I would definitely say so. And can you explain, Dr. Burt, to us, to the folks who are listening tonight, and hopefully we'll engage in this conversation later on some questions. And let me say this too: our whole goal is about solutions, and so not only do we want to have a conversation with respect to the lack of tenured professors, Black professors, I would say, and probably even other professors of color. But we want to have a conversation about what are some of the solutions and how do we remove these barriers, right? Can you just tell us briefly, what does it mean? What is tenure and what does it mean to be tenured?
Typically, tenure means that after a person has satisfactorily worked with over a 7-year time period, the faculty, along with the chair and the dean of the college, will grant what is called tenure to a person. And tenure literally means that that person has a job for as long as he or she wishes to work at the university, especially if in fact they continue to show progress in terms of their teaching, their scholarship, and their professional publication.
Okay. Yeah, and I was looking at it, and it's interesting because I was just sharing a little bit earlier before you came on. I was doing a little research, and I came up on this data from the Journal of Blacks in Education. And this is really interesting to me, and it's actually not only interesting, but it's harrowing to me. And it indicates that Black academics represent less than 5%. And this is from a 2007 data dashboard that they put out. Less than 5% of all tenured professors in the country. And then it goes on to say growth over that time has been minimal in terms of these educators receiving tenure. So it'd be interesting. I would assume that it probably we haven't seen a major uptick in those numbers. I was just also telling the audience, when we look at professors like Dr. Cornel West, who was denied tenure at Harvard in his area, and then Nicole Hannah Jones, which received national and probably worldwide attention. She's a professor at UNC, who was initially, I believe, granted, and then they rescinded. And so, and again, another Black female. But I want to get into fundamentally what sparked us to have this conversation. And it is really, we want to definitely have a global what's next? How can we help address these things, especially from a community-driven perspective, right? Because as we know, Calvin University, regardless of how they feel, that they are too members of the broader community.
Absolutely.
And they have a responsibility to this broader community. And so there is a case right now that is pending, actually that's been in the courts for well over a year. And the case name is Calvin versus Westbrook. And so it's Calvin University versus Dr. Nalova Westbrook. And so Dr. Westbrook, I believe, started her career at Calvin since 2012. And of course, I'm sure, as you probably can relate to, many professors, academics, that's probably a goal to receive tenure at some point as they travel down this road, right? Is that fair to say?
It is.
And so Dr. Westbrook was one of those academics, one of those professors with an impeccable pedigree, and wanted to and had started to prepare herself to be granted tenure. And so through this process, some things happened, and she actually, which I find really interesting, she was actually recommended for tenure by Dr. Michelle Lloyd Page, who, by the way, and this was in 2018, October 2018. And Dr. Michelle Lloyd Page is the executive associate to the president for diversity. And I'm assuming equity as well. And so, as you know, we all are human, and we all have opportunities for improvement. And it's my understanding that there were some things, some direction that was provided, and some feedback to Dr. Westbrook as she was pursuing or moving down this road of tenure. She did address those things with flying colors. And then at some point, it seems like to me, in my understanding, and just trying to wrap my arms around all of this, because, I'm not, prior to this, had not been familiar with this whole tenure process. And also, as you can speak to, Dr. Burt, the steps, the levels that you have to go through in terms of advisors and approval and all of the final recommendations, right? And so, and I'm not going to get into all of the weeds, but there were some things that happened, some conversations that happened. And then she went through all of the steps, and then eventually was denied tenure at Kelvin University. And one of the things that I actually find interesting, and this is well documented as well, was one of the some comments by one of her peers or reviewers or what have you, that she received, or feedback that she received as one of the rationales why she did not receive tenure was based on her African ancestry. And also the inability, I call it inability, right, for the white or Caucasian students to feel comfortable with her, right, in a sense, which is very telling to me, and it suggests a whole lot of things, right? And then I know there was an incident where there was a young lady who she had provided a legitimate grade of an A-, and the young lady took offense to that, took it to the powers at the university, and then Dr. Westwood got, I think, what I would consider some pressure to change this grade. And then it's just things started to spiral. But let me give you a little bit, because I do think this is important. So the case that is pending right now in the courts here, Kelvin filed suit against Dr. Westbrook for allegedly a breach of contract. And what's interesting to me is, so they filed this suit based on in a breach of confidentiality, right? So they filed this suit based on the fact that she had consulted with the NAACP and a former professor or prop at Kelvin University. And we had sent, and this was in 2020. So, but backing up, when this incident started to occur and unravel, Dr. Westbrook actually filed her initial complaint with the NAACP in April 7th of 2020. And this was way before Kelvin filed their lawsuit claiming breach of confidentiality, breach of contract, et cetera, et cetera. And so we sent a letter, as we do to all of our respondents, indicating that we simply want to sit down and have a conversation, right? In a conversation that we can get, try to reach a solution that is amenable to all parties involved. So both the respondent and our client, which we call the complainant. And then after that, there was Dr. Westbrook filed a second. She had filed initially an EEOC complaint. And by the way, during this whole process, she followed her internal processes as far as evidentiary hearings and everything that was available to her internally to get this looked at and examined. And that really didn't move, in my opinion, anywhere. And so she filed an EEOC complaint and then filed a second EEOC charge against Calvin for wrongful termination. And now this was in April. Pay close attention to this. April 22, those of you who are listening, April 2020. And then in April, after that second EEOC complaint was filed, the board affirms Dr. Michael Leroy's decision to dismiss Professor Westbrook from her duties as a professor at Kelvin. And I think that action alone is very, very telling, quite honestly. And I think it is egregious. And we've reached out to Kelvin a couple of times to specifically Dr. Michael Leroy, who's the president of Kelvin, again, to try to have a conversation where we could bring both parties together and come up with a resolution. Because here's the deal: since Dr. Westbrook was terminated, and this is all being mindful, happening at the beginning of the pandemic, in the middle of the pandemic, economic instability like we've never seen. And then they fire Dr. Westbrook, and then denied and went after denying that she received any unemployment benefits. So essentially, she's been living off of her own and financing her own lifestyle right now. But more importantly, is this action taken by Kelvin can actually ruin her possibilities of ever working in academia. And so, as we wanted to also not only have a conversation with Dr. Leroy about this case, but again, a global conversation about some of the glaring microaggressions, white fragility, and all other things, prejudice that's happening right in the confines of Kelvin University, who I want to remind folks, was founded based on Christian principles. And so, Dr. Bird, I'll stop there and let you jump into to this if you want to react to anything that I said.
Well, the situation that you're discussing is quite typical throughout the country when it relates to black professors. There are a number of universities that will take ambitious steps to bring individuals in, but will not necessarily provide the resources or a clear understanding what they may have to do in order to gain tenure. For example, when a person walks into the university, that individual should have a coach. The person should have should meet with should meet with the dean, the chair of the department, along with the dean, to measure their progress. As a matter of fact, many of the college professors, the chair, and the dean, literally would come into the classes to talk with them. To sit in their classes to evaluate their teaching. Secondly, as a professor or a person who hopes to get tenure, they must also publish. And there should be some clear guidelines in terms of how the publication should occur. For example, if you're a new professor within a department, typically the chair and the dean will assign that person to a full-time professor that's publishing, so that individual can get his or her name attached to some of the publication, so that they get a feel for what a publication looks like, how the research should go and get published, and get it published. So within the 2 to 3 years, they should have several publications, what you may call joint publication, which is very important to the tenure process. And then that individual should have based what we call a series of research that they can use in order to publish their own publication. But all of this is part of the process. And not only are you expected to publish, but you also should be able to provide what is called, because you're an expert in a field, you should be able to work with people within your community, and in the community on areas that are particularly germane to your area. And also that helps to develop your credibility as a professional. And you should be able to speak at conferences. And that again shows your professional acumen and additional publication. And at some point in time, usually at the end of each year or every 2 years, someone should be sitting down with you, going over your portfolio, and then telling the person what they need to do in order to enhance if there are difficulties. The other thing too is that a person is responsible, if a person is able to go and secure grants to the university, that is extremely important in the whole tenure process. So if a person can go out and get hundreds of thousands of dollars and bring it back to the department, guess what? The people within the department now literally benefit from your bringing in dollars, and that should be given some additional consideration in the whole tenure process.
And I will say, and I'm glad you mentioned that about bringing in revenue, because we know in any institution, whether it's nonprofit or for-profit, on a nonprofit side, oftentimes that revenue generation is through grants and corporate sponsorships, et cetera, et cetera. And then on the for-profit side, it may be through the selling of some product or what have you. But we know that revenue generations makes the engine, or is the source that the engine will continue to run.
Yes.
And to run efficiently. And in Dr. Westbrook's case, she actually brought in what I consider a sizable grant, especially from a professor level, in the amount of about $200,000 to the university and to their department. And as you said, this is something that should definitely, again, is really no small feat when you think about the whole process of, in the also the competitiveness of these grants, which is no small feat as well. And so, I'm very disappointed in Calvin University and in Dr. Michael Leroy. And I say that on two folds. Again, and I'm going to repeat this, folks, we have to remember that, their whole vision and mission and university code is essentially based on biblical principles, right? And fundamentally doing the right thing, treating your brother and sister as you would treat yourself, in those things. And I have to say, there has been none of that in the case of Dr. Westbrook. And again, I think it was a slap in the face to the NAACP when Dr. Leroy did not respond to a letter that he received from me, simply asking to let's sit down and have a conversation. And if we would have had that conversation, I think that we probably would not be he would probably be on here joining us tonight, in solidarity, in saying, in providing some solutions in terms of how we can not only um, um, support Black faculty who's on that tenure track, but also how can we increase the diversity profile for the university across the board, right?
Yes.
And so Kelvin has had they have a history, and so this was interesting as well. And so he did not respond and take me up on that offer until you know uh shared I believe that letter with some a supporter at the university, um and then he responded to me basically saying that you can meet with, and I'm paraphrasing, you can meet with Dr. Michelle Lloyd Page, who's our, again, executive associate for his office when it comes to diversity and equity. Well, here's the thing. I didn't ask to meet with Dr. Lloyd Page. I asked to have a conversation with you as the president of this institution, right? And so it was really a slap in the face, because no, you're the leader of this institution, and as a leader, I'm sorry, when tough times come. And so the and again, folks, I think, and then I'll get to some of the comments. If you have a comment, please feel free to put them in the remarks. But the the we have a responsibility from a community level, from a community perspective, to question and to demand answers. And I think this is a case where we want to ask our community members, our partners, residents, to not only look at this case. I know Dr. Burt has some other things going on as well, but again, we just thank him for taking the time out on a short notice to be here with us tonight. But again, the community has a responsibility to ask questions, and especially based on the lack of representation when it comes to academia, and not only just academia, folks, but when it comes to businesses and institutions and organizations across the board. Because the same thing applies to, we're talking about tenure from an academic perspective, but also the same applies when you are looking at corporate America and there's no representation at the board level or the suite seat level of Black individuals and other individuals from communities of color. And so we have to challenge that. We have to challenge that. And I know there was a question in the stream about tenure, and so Dr. Burt did address that question, and kind of what that means, what that looks like. And so I hope that was sufficient enough for you guys, for the audience members who are joining. Again, if you have questions, please put those in the comments section and let us know, and then we'll answer them to the best of our ability as we move forward. One of the things that I will say that is coming up this week is a hearing from Calvin, actually in the case of Calvin University versus Dr. Westbrook, and that is on Friday, and it is a virtual hearing. And so if anyone would like to attend that virtually, I think we can we can put the link. We can try to find the link and put in our put the link into the comment section here. Dorothy, one of our viewers, has asked, "What about denying admissions of students?" And so again, I think, but Dorothy, here's the thing about that. Those were the type of questions on a bigger conversation, on a bigger scale, that also we wanted to speak with Dr. Leroy in his executive leadership team about, what specifically to him about not only have I heard rumors about denying admissions, but also what about the retention rate of Black students specifically at Calvin University? What's the graduation rate ratio compared, the successful graduation rate of Black students successfully completing their university degree, their comparative to their white counterparts? Because I do know, and I have had conversation with students, Black students there at Calvin about the gross microaggressions and the lack, or I should say the insensitivity when it comes to other cultures that are different from theirs. And so I do think that's another conversation to have. And again, not only with Calvin University, which was formerly Calvin College, but with a number of other predominantly white institutions in this area, quite honestly. So we have put the link to the hearing on this Friday. And what's interesting about this hearing too, again, folks, this has been going on for over a year. Just a gross misuse of money from students, from families, in taxpayer dollars. When if they would have just essentially humbled themselves a little bit, right, and sat down with Dr. Westbrook to have a sensical conversation about how to move forward. This is not, you do not try to destroy somebody's livelihood. And that's it again. You do not try to destroy somebody's livelihood that has been that is dedicated their time not only to your university and the students there, but to the principles of what you say you have been established for. The other thing that, and we can talk about, I think a number of different instances, like the incident that happened with Dr. Denise Isom, and this is all public information. Dr. Denise Isom, who was a former professor, also at Calvin University, and I believe this was happened in 2019. And so Dr. Isom quit her professorship based on the fact that Calvin did not and made it very clear to her that she could not attend a Black Baptist church. And so again, some of the glaring and again, just outright prejudice and quite honestly harassment, in our opinion, based on in this incident maybe race and gender. And so those are some of the things that we have to address and with Calvin directly. And so as we're wrapping this up as well, I believe we have we're doing a call to action for community. And oftentimes it's interesting when you have these cases, how they can fly under the radar. And I do strongly believe that Calvin University, their whole intent was to not only continue to pressure Dr. Westbrook, but to really to choke the life out of her fight, and not, having this case become public. And so I'm going to ask everybody who's listening tonight a couple of things. If you can, please attend the hearing. It's on this Friday. We put a link out there. It's at 3 p.m. So January the 14th at 3 p.m. But also, I want you to, again, we'll talk a little bit more about this later as we close, to sign the petition that we put together. And also to, and we can put, I don't know, a production at some point, if we can put the email addresses of the board members, the board of trustees that we were able to find, and send them an email, basically letting them know that this issue has to be resolved in a manner better than this. The hearing on Friday, it's my understanding that Calvin University has filed a motion to dismiss Dr. Westbrook's counterclaim. And I also, and I don't know this to be fact or anything, but I'm assuming based on the trajectory of steps in other hearings that's taken place, that there could be a decision to totally dismiss this case and claim, and not in favor of Dr. Westbrook. And so again, folks, we must raise attention to these issues, and that's why we decided to do this pop-up and to have a conversation with respect to this. And so I'm going to go into the comment section and see if we can address some other comments. Thank you, Brother Johnson, for your comment. Good evening, Neosho. Thank you for joining us as well. I know you're very familiar with some of the injustices that happen. And let me say this too, tied to this as well, because this is now in the judicial system in terms of the court system, right? That's why it is critically important for us to exercise our democratic right to vote, because we know that the judges and other officials are elected officials. And so we need individuals in those seats that understand different cultural nuances, for one, and that has a sense of compassion, two, and that has a sense of a relationship with all communities, right? So again, it is critically important. I'm scrolling through some of the comments here. Thank you guys for your comments as well. And again, that's why it is just critically important for us to exercise our right to vote. I agree, Daniel Smith, their interpretation of biblical principles. And you know what that led to, and we won't even go down that road in terms of the justification of slavery, of slave and African people. But we that's a whole nother another conversation. I'm looking. Miosha says, a great question. I think she's referring to the questions about Calvin universities and probably other predominantly white institutions denying admissions to Black and Brown students. And she indicates that she knows that many universities here struggle with that. And she indicates that there's a solution, but they have to really want to make it happen and give individuals the powers to see it through. I absolutely agree. They really have to want to make it happen. And here is the other thing. They have to have a level of commitment to the core principles of really what does it mean for an institution to not only speak about the importance of, as Calvin did during the whole George Floyd murder, in the other uprisings, when they came out to talk about the importance of inclusivity and social justice, and actually, which I find very interesting, recommended to the Calvin community that they support the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. And the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, many of you, I'm sure, know, is a separate organization from the NAACP. NAACP LDF actually started as an arm of the national NAACP office, and then went off to start an independent arm focusing on legal redress and things like that. But it's those things. So it's not only just to talk about it, but it's actually people have to be willing to do the work and make the investment in the commitment in order to see the change that needs to happen. Actually, that it actually will take place. And so, again, a critical conversation. You can also, again, as some would say, Google is our best friend, right? But there's a ton of information out there, stories, is my understanding, specifically related to not only the issue, this case with Dr. Westbrook, Nalova Westbrook and Calvin University, but other issues that they've had, especially when it comes to academics of color. And that has to be addressed. And Calvin, as I said earlier, has to understand that you are a member of this community. You don't stand alone. You're a member of this community. And you have a responsibility to address issues like this when they arise. Because not only does not only impact Dr. Westbrook, it impacts our entire community. It impacts your students of color who's currently attending Calvin University, who does not see the representation or anyone who looks like them. And by the way, Dr. Westbrook was the only professor of color, I believe, in the Department of Education. And that's just unacceptable. That should be that should be totally unacceptable. And we shouldn't settle for that. As all Miosha says, there is a reason Blacks did not stay. We look for stability. That's true. And opportunity while seeking education because we are looking for a place to plant. That is absolutely true. In a place not only to plant, but a place of that has some level of security, right? Whatever that looks like. And she goes on to say, if there isn't any of that, why would I stay? It's a waste. It's a waste of an education. And that is absolutely true. And so one of the things too is we're looking at ways from an NAACP perspective to support Black students, but all students of color on the campus of Calvin University. And so we are looking at ways to best support them, to make sure that, again, that they are successful there. I know that we do have actually a couple of our youth council members and leaders who attend the university currently, and so have been in conversation with them in terms of some of the change that needs to take place at this university. So I believe we have put up the sign the petition link. If you can, again, not only sign the petition, but share this with individuals in your respective networks, and ask them to sign this petition. And what we're asking is that it's our understanding that Dr. Leroy has submitted his resignation, in that the resignation will go into effect, I believe, in June, is my understanding. But what we will be, so this petition is asking that the university's trustees terminate his contract immediately, because in our opinion, this is gross neglect, and it's also, even on behalf of the university leadership, a gross mismanagement of funds. Let's be honest, folks. If they would have come to the table and had a conversation a year ago, I mean, a legitimate and respectful conversation, this could be over. Dr. Westbrook could have gone on and moved on to other things, and not have had this stress. And that was our role, was to, we want to understand perspective from both sides. Dr. Westbrook, he had submitted his resignation. I think there's a question in the comments, has he resigned already? He submitted, as my understanding, his resignation, but the resignation does not go into effect until June. So he is still officially the president of the university, and up until June. But what we're asking is that his contract be terminated. That's what we're asking. And so that's a good question. Let me look at any of the other questions. Again, the hearing is this Friday, and there is a link to Judge Rossi's courtroom that is open to the public to hear and to tap in. And so we strongly encourage you. We strongly encourage you to do that as well. I think that is those, I should say, those are some of the highlights. It's a lot of information with respect to this case. But if you have additional questions or comments, please feel free to contact us, and we will answer those as quickly as possible to the best of our ability. Also, I want to also emphasize the link that's on the screen to visit our website at naacpgr.com and sign up for any volunteer opportunities. And as those opportunities become available, we create an ongoing database of volunteer opportunities or individuals who say they want to volunteer, as well as we encourage you to consider a membership in the Grand Rapids NAACP. Folks, we have a lot of work to do because as we say, our lives depend on it. And we have a lot of work to do. And stay tuned to other upcoming announcements. I believe on June 19th. Well, actually, let me back up. Not June 19th, but January. I'm trying to move fast forward very quickly, I guess, get this year over. But January the 17th, we have a viewing of the Obama movie in recognition of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, his day. In the Pursuit of a More Perfect Union is the movie. We're offering folks the opportunity to come out on January 17th on Monday to view this. So again, this information can be found as well on our website, and we'll be sending out, continue to send out information on this screening, which should be very exciting as well. And also, I must say this, taking into consideration all of the precautions based on where we are in this pandemic. And so we have to be diligent and cautious of how we move. And so I want to say this, and I will be remiss if I didn't. We have to understand that we are still in this pandemic, and that we also have to understand that we have to do what is necessary and that is required. Simple things like making sure, and we said this when we did the live stream called COVID Uncovered, washing your hands 20 seconds for at least 20 seconds, covering your mouth, wearing a facial covering, a mask of some sorts, especially when you're out in public or when you're in large groups, and making sure that we keep our environments as sterile as possible. I just received some information yesterday that in Michigan on Friday, there were, as of Friday, 30,000. Actually, I think that day, Friday, there were 30,000 positive cases confirmed of individuals who had tested positive in Michigan just on that day. And so we just have to be vigilant in making sure that we do all that we can do. So I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. I want to thank Dr. Walter Burt for again jumping on at a very short notice. He had a variety of things happening tonight, and needed to do some preparation for some things that he's engaged in early in the morning. So I want to thank him for joining us tonight. And we will continue this conversation because this is a big conversation. I want to bring other academics from not only here locally, but from across the country in on this conversation and to keep the conversation moving. Dr. Bird, I want to thank you for joining us. And again, such a short notice. I know you got a lot of different moving parts. I was telling the folks watching that I think it's important for us to continue this conversation, right?
Yes.
And to bring academics not only here locally, but from across the country, and to really pay attention to these this issue and other issues when it comes to the successful completion of our young people from these higher institutions of education, and making sure that they get a rich, culturally relevant experience, right?
I want to thank you. I want to thank you very much for bringing this matter to the attention of so many people, because there's so many people who do not realize what Black professors are going through once they get into the university. We don't get the same information as our corresponding white colleagues get. Many people are reluctant to shepherd us through this lengthy process, and we're certainly treated differently. And so I think this topic is needed, and I want to again thank you very much for bringing it to light.
Well, thank you for joining us this evening. I will say also, I understand that there may be some type of a planned protest tomorrow on the campus of Kelvin University. Well, I would say maybe not directly on the campus, but out front of the campus on the public sidewalk. I'll just say that of Kelvin University. And so stay tuned for that. If it's something the organizers want us to share, we will share that and send that out through our social media channels as well. But I want to remind everyone to, if you can, to attend the hearing this Friday, 3 p.m., January 14th, as well as sign the petition. And then if anyone wants information, somehow we'll try to push this out as well. The contact information, email addresses, let me clarify that, for many of the Board of Trustee members and express your concerns that way as well. So again, we thank you for joining us on this live stream. I think this is probably, we did a lot of these, which were very successful in terms of reaching people throughout the pandemic, throughout the Get Out the Vote thing. So I think we're ready to jumpstart this again in 2022.
Fantastic.
And stay tuned. We will be launching a podcast over the next 3 to 6 months as well. So we can definitely have another means of communication and keeping our community updated and informed. So you all have a good evening, and we look forward to engaging soon.
Thank you.